Bear Grylls is the real-life hero we all grew up watching, performing such incredible feats that left us in awe. He did things that we couldn't even dream of, but he made them a reality with his strong mindset. However, do you know that Bear Grylls wasn't always like this? The man who appears to be fearless and strong was once weak, scared, anxious, and even suffered from depression. In his autobiography, Mud, Sweat, and Tears, Bear Grylls writes, "Fear makes you appear tough on the outside, but it makes you weak and vulnerable inside." Bear Grylls had a tremendous fear of heights, known as acrophobia, but miraculously, a few years later, he was descending from a helicopter at the start of every episode of his show. Bear Grylls was also a part of the UK's Special Forces, SAS, where he gained extensive parachuting experience. He had jumped from planes many times. At the age of 21, during a mission in Zambia in 1996, Bear Grylls jumped from a height of 16,000 feet. However, this time his parachute didn't open properly. As soon as he jumped, he timed it right and opened the parachute, but he was still falling rapidly. When he looked up, he realized the parachute hadn't fully opened. He began frantically pulling the cords, trying to get it to open completely. Amidst all this, he collided with trees and crashed to the ground, and suddenly, everything went dark. He had fallen on his back and was conscious, feeling excruciating pain. Worse, even after such a high fall, he was still awake. He couldn't move and just lay there, crying out loudly, hoping his companions would come to rescue him. The pain was so unbearable that he thought death would be better, but even death wasn't coming to him. He remained there in agony for a long time. His companions eventually took him to a hospital in Africa. He remembers the doctor giving him an injection in his back, and slowly the pain began to subside. He started thinking he was getting better and tried to get up, but then the doctor told him he could never walk again. Hearing this, the world came crashing down for the young 21-year-old Bear Grylls. When he saw the X-ray, it was clear that 3 of his vertebrae, T8, T10, and T12, were broken. These are the strongest bones in the human back, and they were completely shattered. The young man who used to climb mountains could no longer even walk to the bathroom. He says the pain of breaking those bones in a parachute fall wasn't as bad as the pain of spending a year in the hospital trying to mend those bones. Lying in the hospital bed, he thought he might never walk again. Adventure, exploring new places, and living life to the fullest were the reasons he lived. This injury had taken away the very reason for his existence. He couldn't sleep at night, drenched in sweat from anxiety, gasping for breath. Every night he was filled with regret, self-pity, and even hatred for himself. 2 months had passed, but instead of improving, his condition was getting worse. The pain was increasing, and his body was becoming stiffer. Seeing his situation, he became more and more negative. He couldn't find joy in anything. He would get angry and cry over the smallest things. Slowly, he slipped deeper into depression. People who knew him thought Bear Grylls was a very positive person, mentally tough, and would face this challenge with courage and positivity. But that wasn't the case. He was just 21 years old and was terrified. He didn't know how he would live the rest of his life or what he would do. He could see all his dreams fading away. One night, lying in bed, he saw a photo frame far away. It was a picture of Mount Everest. Since childhood, Bear Grylls and his father had dreamed of climbing Mount Everest one day. Seeing that dusty photo frame, he felt as if his dreams were also covered in dust, something he couldn't bear. That night, there was no one with him. He was alone. Summoning all his strength, he stood up with the help of crutches and went to the photo frame. He wiped off the dust and thought to himself about how he could give himself the strength to live. This thought deeply settled in his subconscious mind, giving him the courage and hope to live. The next day, when he woke up, he remembered something his grandmother used to say, "Bear, my son, whatever happens in life happens for the good. It is human nature to find excuses to make ourselves sad and miserable. Whenever you face a problem, always remind yourself that whatever is happening is God's will, and He never lets anything go wrong." At that moment, he understood the depth of this truth and realized that he could have died in that accident, but since he was still alive, it meant God had a better plan for him. After that, he stopped worrying about what would happen in his life, whether he would walk again or not, whether he would return to to the special forces or not? These concerns no longer troubled him. When his overthinking decreased, his mind found peace. His stress and negativity also started to diminish. He began repairing his mind before his body. As his mind grew stronger, his body began to heal itself. His wounds started to heal faster, and the speed at which his bones were mending increased. He remembered something his closest friend, Ed Ems, had once told him. Often, God holds birth, death, and rebirth in his hands, and this injury is your rebirth. Now I'm like a new child with no worries about anything, not about the past, nor about the future. I'm just grateful for the present. Bear Grylls says, life often doesn't give us a second chance, but when it does, we must be very grateful. He was grateful for his life, his broken back, and his dreams. He took the picture of Mount Everest in his hand and said out loud, as soon as I recover, I will climb Mount Everest and touch its summit. The one thing that helped him the most to get out of depression was his goal, his aim, and his dream. Until then, he didn't have a reason to live, but in that state where he couldn't even walk, he promised himself that he would climb Mount Everest. When he told the people around him that he wanted to climb Mount Everest after recovering, they ignored his words. But his goal was crystal clear. He had to recover as soon as possible. Both his body and mind now had a goal to work towards together. After the accident, the pain started to subside in the 3rd month, and 8 months later, he was discharged from the hospital. Within a year, he was fully recovered, but the doctors had advised him not to return to the special forces for training. He had no job, so there was no money, but to fulfill his dream, he needed 2.5 million rupees to train for climbing Mount Everest and buy the necessary equipment. To achieve this, he wrote sponsorship proposals to around 250 companies, but all of them rejected him. Despite facing 250 rejections, he didn't stop. He knocked on many doors, but disappointment greeted him repeatedly. Eventually, the SSFA, Special Forces Help Organization, helped him realize his dream. 18 months after the parachuting accident, on May 16, 1998, he fulfilled his childhood dream. The journey of climbing Mount Everest was a story in itself. The journey wasn't easy at all. 4 of his companions lost their lives, and he faced 2 near-death experiences. But somehow, at the age of 23, he became the youngest person from Britain to reach the summit of Mount Everest. After this, his story became very famous. People started inviting him to seminars as a speaker. Several documentaries were made about him, and finally, he got the opportunity from Discovery that gave him worldwide fame. After that, everyone came to know him through Man vs. Wild, and perhaps you're one of them too. If you like this video, please click the like and subscribe buttons to support the growth of this channel, and turn on the bell notification so you don't miss the upcoming videos. Thank you for watching.